I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, Dave, do you have any questions on attendance? Next up is agenda approval. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the board agenda?
I have a little bit of all. First, the person who had signed up for open forum was canceled at the last minute, so that is crossed off. When I had put the board agenda public, there were a couple things that I said you'd have numbers on Monday. The first one is district funds, so that has been added. Today we had a resignation, so that's been added to the board agenda. In the superintendent's report, I did add a little bit more just what the itinerary would be for the volleyball trip, so when we get to my report, we can go through that. We had a board committee meeting this morning, so I added that. We were not able to have a board member go to the last SCRED governing board, so I had changed that. The second thing that I said would be added Monday was our current spending through the year, so I've added that to the agenda. And I think that is all. Oh, Friday afternoon I added a 5th draft of a school calendar based on staff feedback I had, so there's an additional draft of the school calendar and some rationale that we'll go through when we get to school calendar. And that's all my changes.
Does anybody have any questions regarding changes or additions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is open forum. Rules for open forum. There are 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than a total of 15 minutes. No complaints about individual staff members, about students, or about other persons at a public meeting. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in open forum. Does anybody wish to speak during open forum? If not, we are going to move on to the presentation of the audit. And Andy is here to present.
Good evening, thanks for having me here tonight. Here to present the audit results for June 30th, 2024. So I have a PowerPoint slide here that highlights the components of our audit. So in your agenda packet tonight, you do have the district's financial statements as well as our communications letter. In that financial statement, we do have our independent auditor's report that gives the opinion on the financial statement. We also have our government auditing standards report and a report on federal programs, as well as the Minnesota legal compliance report, all in that financial statement document. And then the separate communication that we have gives all the other required communication as well as some financial analysis that we'll highlight in some charts and graphs here coming up. Next slide, again, highlights that report that is in the financial statements. That does highlight what our role is as your auditor, as well as what management's role is. And management does have that role to close the books at the end of the year. And it's our job as your auditor to come in, test, examine, look at the support to support the numbers in the financial statements, and ultimately give the opinion here tonight, which is a clean or an unmodified opinion, which is the best that we can give as your auditor. Going on to the next slide, I did want to highlight the government auditing standards report. This report talks about the internal control over financial reporting, and we do have to highlight anything that comes to either a significant deficiency or material weakness level. Did have 2 findings to report here tonight, which are lack of segregation of accounting duties and material audit adjustments. The lack of segregation of accounting duties finding is a consistent finding with the prior year, and then we also have a new finding for this year for adjustments that were proposed. The next report we have, going up there, is our federal program report. And we did have the Title I program and the Child Nutrition program that was tested for this year, had no findings to report. And then the last report here is on Minnesota legal compliance, and we had 4 compliance findings to report this year. right, going on to the charts and graphs in the communications letter. Wanted to start by taking a look at general education aid. This chart highlights the formula allowance that the district gets per pupil unit. And here in 2024, you do see that there was a 4% increase, and that was an increase over previous years, which were historically at around 2%, and going back to 2% here in 2025. And the next chart highlights the enrollment at the district. And first taking a look at resident ADM served. Resident ADM are the residents in the district boundaries here, and these are the ADM or the students that the district could serve. That has decreased going back to 2022, which was a high point, down to about 1,035 here for 2024. That number is going forward one more. One more, there we go.
Good.
That number is converted into a pupil unit number, which is then used for the calculation of general education aid. And that conversion does involve a 20% premium that you get for secondary students, but also takes into account the open enrollment process. When we take a look at residents, staying there right there on that slide, sorry there. The residents did decline here for 2024. And then the open enrollment loss did increase here in 2024. So the resident pupil unit loss increased from 323 up to 336. And the non-resident pupil unit gain declined from 233 down to 217. So the pupil unit served did decrease down to about 1,011 here for 2024. Next chart highlights adjusted pupil units as well as the following slide, just in bar graph format, and then going, right there, yep, perfect. This does highlight the rate of change between the 2 years. So we do see that the most significant decrease in the years presented did occur here in 2024 with about a 4% decrease in pupil units served. The next chart highlights the general fund sources of revenue here over the last 5 years. We did see an increase in overall revenues of about 7%. About 78% of the general fund revenues come from state sources. That did increase from 11 million up to about $12.7 million. That was about a 15% increase overall, so part of that was the 2% increase in the formula allowance. And then there were some additional aids that were available this year that we'll highlight here in some following slides, some restricted revenue sources that were new here in 2024. And then also saw an increase in special education funding with an increase in special education costs. Other sources include your federal sources of revenue with the COVID-19 pandemic relief funding, mainly being fully spent here as we get to the end of 2024. Again, that was the result of the increase back in 2022 and 2023 as well. Are those COVID-19 funds that did decrease about $700,000 here for 2024. That was offset by investment earnings. Those came in a little bit better than last year with an increase in interest rates, and local property taxes have been fairly consistent dating back to 2021. Going forward, one more slide there, Brian, thank you. I did see just a 0.7% increase in overall general fund expenditures here for 2024. Overall, the allocation amongst programs have been fairly consistent. Did see an increase in regular instruction. That increased 2 percentage points compared to 2023, but overall, fairly consistent allocation of program expenditures. And then the next chart highlights the budget to actual results for 2024. The original budget called for about $170,000 decline in fund balance. That budget was amended to anticipate about a $792,000 decline in fund balance. And ultimately did see an increase in fund balance of about $824,000. So about 1.6 million better than anticipated, and the majority of that occurred on the revenue side. That came in about $1.8 million. Better than anticipated. State sources came in better in terms of special education funding, also being conservative for enrollment. And then the other sources, there were additional COVID-19 grants that were utilized in 2024, causing that variance. And then on the expenditure side, just a 0.7% variance related to expenditures. Sites and buildings was under budget by $527,000 with some delayed capital costs, and that was offset by some capital transportation related purchases in the people support services category. All right, going forward, one more chart there. Did have also some state averages and some comparison information for revenues and expenditures per ADM served. So do have that for prior years and to compare to statewide averages. And then going on, I think 2 more slides there. There we go, general fund operations overall. So as we saw in the budget to actual slides, we did see an overall increase in fund balance in the general fund, going from 4.5 million up to about $5.3 million. And the bottom part of that chart highlights the different categories of fund balance. And as mentioned earlier, with the increase in general fund revenues here in 2024, the additional revenue streams that you're seeing for American Indian Ed Aid, student support personnel, medical assistance, there were some unspent dollars in those restricted revenue categories at the end of 2024. The remainder of the increase in overall fund balance is in the unassigned category, which increased from 4.2 million up to about $4.8 million at the end of the year. The board does have a policy in place to maintain a minimum unassigned fund balance of 25% of expenditures, and the district is in compliance with that policy at the end of the year, with unassigned fund balance representing about 31% of expenditures. Next chart here just highlights a metric used by MDE and does have some comparative information. It takes unrestricted fund balance as a percent of unrestricted expenditures. The district has historically been better than statewide averages, and here at the end of the year for 2024 was at about 39%. Next chart, we do have the food service fund operations for the last 5 years. 2023 and 2024, both years did require a transfer from the general fund to cover the deficit operations. Was a lesser deficit here in 2024 of about $106,000. Ended the year with a fund balance of about $19,000. And going on to the last chart, Community Service Fund also did run a deficit over the last few years. Actually, 4 out of the 5 years presented required about a $52,000 transfer from the general fund this year, ending fund balance at about $14,000. That's a high-level look at the audit results here for 2024, and it's good to see some familiar faces tonight. Don't always get that at these presentations. So next, just like to open it up for any questions.
I have one of the food service fund.
Sure.
Now, we get reimbursed, why or how do we still end up with a big deficit?
Sure, so it has changed significantly over the past several years. The COVID-19 funding was back in 2022 that did provide better reimbursement rates. So you did see a deficit in that period going back to 2021. But the state does provide additional funding now for meals served, but the reimbursement rates in this situation aren't enough to cover the cost of operating that particular service at those levels. So just having kind of those lower reimbursement rates.
Are most schools in that same boat?
I wouldn't say most are. I think some are, but some are, have kind of are able to make it work in other ways. But just kind of depending on the level of service and the cost required to provide it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, go ahead, Jody.
The one question I had is, do you know if we use the LTFM funds that we have up there of what, 129,000?
So those,
Can we use those restricted, or do we need to use those restricted for maintenance or facilities before we would go into our general fund?
correct, yep.
Okay,
So,
so-
yep, the policy is to use restricted fund balance before the use of unassigned resources. So if there are available expenditures that can be applied to those should be utilized.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Toby?
What were the material audit adjustments?
Sure, so those are highlighted in the communications letter and the report on government auditing standards. So at the end of the year, there are certain fund balance codes, revenues that were misstated. So just took some time to get those reconciled and reported correctly for 2024.
So how many misstatements were there and what kind of dollar amounts are we talking about?
In the over $100,000 in certain cases. So I think you could probably highlight some of the areas that I think capital assets, depreciation, state revenues and receivables, federal revenues and receivables. So they're kind of various different adjustments there, but be happy to provide some additional detail on those.
Sure. And do you see the district taking appropriate action so that doesn't happen again in the future?
So in that government auditing standards report, the two findings that are reported for this year, the lack of segregation of accounting duties and that material audit adjustments finding are fairly related in that the district just doesn't have the internal controls to ensure that the numbers are correctly stated at the end of the year. So the lack of segregation of accounting duties finding is specific to the process in that technically you'd want to have a separate individual that's initiating and authorizing a transaction, another that's recording, another that has custody of the related assets, and another that reconciles and report that. That would help to identify errors that are human errors, fraud-related errors, but those are difficult. It's a difficult bar to achieve in terms of a cost perspective. It takes additional bodies, but having additional reviews, additional oversight on those reconciliations, making sure they're done correctly without errors. It's kind of the improvements that we'd like to see, or would suggest to see in those processes to try to identify those more timely.
We have already changed up a little bit where Bridget's utilizing some of the other district office staff, myself included, for the bank reconciliations, things like that. So we're getting more eyes on it than we have in the past than just the business managers. So we are working towards getting more eyes on that. I don't know if it'll be enough to satisfy that, but we're trying to utilize the 4 or 5 of us we have in the district office to make sure more eyes are looking at what Bridget's doing and then signing off for things like that.
Yeah, so that's in terms of number of people involved, and then additional trainings, additional things that can kind of get more familiar with some of those things, kind of help to support that control environment to make sure you have accurate financial reporting.
Is it common that you see material audit adjustments?
Yes. I would say probably have about 20% of the 50 audits that I do every year that have some level of adjustments, and many rising to that material level.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is it common of a school district size that we have that the lack of segregation is going to be there?
It's common. It is a cost benefit, analysis in terms of, what level we would like that to be at. It is at a material weakness level, which means that it's likely that the condition may not identify a material error in your financial statements. If you did have additional compensating controls, reviews, things that can aid in making sure things are reconciled properly, that can get reduced to maybe a significant deficiency level, which is a mid-level finding, and that's really, where I think districts in a similar position, would want to be in, where maybe it's not completely perfect, but it's at least at a level where the risk of a material misstatement is less.
Okay. And my last question is, does Bridget know, she knows the material audit adjustments, so next year
Correct.
we can lessen them, or, she's only been doing it for 7 months?
Correct. Yep. So just kind of to know, what were the issues? Why did it need to get adjusted? Yep. All of that's available.
Okay.
Do you feel our school district could have better software or better tools to help our people who do these finances?
No, the software is a very common, well-established software that works well for many districts. I think, transitions, and just different ways of doing things can sometimes, be reevaluated just to determine, is that the best way, to do some of those things, or is there another way? And those are things that we, like to try to help identify. And I think, through identifying some of those adjustments and kind of showing where those occurred, we can kind of continue to refine those to make sure those work better going forward.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I do have one more
Sure.
question. So, you said our fund balance is at 31%. Does that include the transfer of food service and community ed?
Correct.
That's after.
That's after. Yeah.
Okay.
That's after.
Okay, thank you.
Wasn't there a number of like 38.9%?
Andy, can you go through, because on this page, I'm almost there. No, not that one. This one.
Sure.
Where you report it's 38.9, but then you had said out loud it was 31.
Right, so this is specific to unrestricted expenditures. So those are identified separately from the calculation in your financial statements. It's a more comparable number to see how you compare to districts because MDE publishes that information, but the policy is specific to unassigned fund balance as it relates to total expenditure.
This would be, are restricted included.
No restricted fund balance is included there, but the piece that's missing there, it's using unrestricted expenditures, not total expenditures.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is there any more questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to accept the audit. So we're gonna need to transfer $107,971 to food service. And we will also transfer $51,772 to the community education fund.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you,
All right,
Andy.
thanks for having me.
Thank you. Next up is our consent agenda. Does anyone need anything pulled from the consent agenda and placed later in the agenda? Brian, did you add anything to the consent
Just-
agenda?
Just that resignation and what our district funds were for bank accounts.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the bills. If you have a question on the bill, please state the page number and the bill number.
And Bridget's here, so perfect.
I did have a couple questions. It's the first page, 95366, but I had asked Brian about, I didn't realize that we spent $9,000 for a huddle to be on.
The coaches each budget for that coming out of the athletic funds, but each sport pays their portion of that. Yes, the district pays for that, and that is the cost. But each sport helps contribute to that through their athletic accounts.
And the second question was on page 3, I believe. It is 95371 Foley Auto Glass for windshield for the bus or something. I thought maybe we have insurance.
Yeah, we should get reimbursed.
Yep, the check came in already. We did get reimbursed for that.
Okay.
I had asked Brian earlier, and I don't know if you had time to look it up, the flags did, or Minnesota Power bill seemed really high this time.
No, I haven't had a
Okay.
chance to look at. I will get back to you on that, Leah.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to pay the bills.
I'll make the motion.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the superintendent's report. Mr. Masterson.
Thank you. Just aware of at least meetings I know of coming up both for myself and for board committee meetings. Jody's going to hand out diplomas at graduation. Thank you. Mr. Lattimore, as we get a little bit closer, will share the plan for graduation. And then our typical baccalaureate service is the Wednesday before graduation. We're still waiting for confirmation from a church, but we will have that set up by the end of May. On February 13th, our local APAC committee, our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, did approve and issued a vote of concurrence on our American Indian Education Plan that we have through MDE. I want to get to number 6, but before we get that, I'm looking for approval for our volleyball team. They are traveling out of state this summer, so I'm looking for out-of-state travel. They would like to go to the Wisconsin Dells for some team building and 6 volleyball games that happen over that 2 days. It would be paid for out of the volleyball athletic funds, so no district funds. They would even pay for the gas for the vehicle and things like that. You can see, I added today what their itinerary would be. At least as of now, they leave Tuesday, the 22nd of July. Wednesday and Thursday, they play games and come home late that Thursday night. We did learn today, and thanks Leo for coming in to check, we do need to get board approval for the out-of-state travel, but we also will, once the board either approves or denies that, would seek Minnesota State High School League approval for that, which was new learning for me today, that we, looks like we do need to get high school league authorization to go to that tournament. I'm not 100% sure why, what it's in summer, but that is in the bylaws, so. So what Mandy had sent me is board approves, because you gotta approve the travel. Then before we go, which I think it has to be at least 21 days before we go, the Minnesota State High School League would have to sign off as well. So I'd be looking for permission to let our volleyball team travel out of state. I don't know if you want to do that before I get to the last part. But otherwise, the last part I'd like to talk about, and I will change this number now that we've heard from the auditor. We have about a 31% fund balance that the auditor just talked about, and I wanted to talk about some ideas that I have for spending that. Like the auditor, like Andy said, our policy is to keep at 25%. I'm glad that we did better, but our intent was never to build our fund balance by 6%. If you recall, about a year ago, when we, at least February last year, when we redid our budget, I was hoping that we'd come in at that 25%. I had thought at that time it might be closer to 24 because of our enrollment, and we weren't 100% certain on all the special ed revenue we'd get. So we did better. We also didn't hire all our positions, didn't spend everything we had thought we might. So we did better, but the intent was never to build our fund balance to 31%. With fund balance money, that's one-time money if you decide to use it. So my thought to spend some of that, obviously we're going to talk about a gym floor later in the agenda, but my thought, if the board is comfortable, would be to come in April with some capital related projects that are one-time costs that we need. My thought for spending some of that 31% on some of our capital projects, it also brings down our capital budget, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which ultimately helps our overall budget and staffing and things like that. So looking for conversation, discussion about if you think that's a good idea to spend some of that down on capital related ideas. Before, that would be my plan if I'm sitting here today, is to come to you in April with some other capital related asks. It wouldn't necessarily go right to 25% immediately, but come back down into the mid-20s, closer to 25%. But looking for some feedback on that as the managers and I go through capital budgets, and then just preparing for next year's budget on that.
In terms of dollar amount, what are we talking about? That 6%?
Roughly a percent is about 150,000.
Okay.
Roughly, I mean, that's not a perfect number, but roughly a percent's about 150,000. So for 6% over, 6 times 150.
Do you know how old our two oldest school buses are?
I have it, I don't have it in
It
front of
was
me.
in our update 2 weeks ago.
I saw that. but
I thought
don't recall.
2007 was our oldest, if I remember.
2007 and 8.
Yeah. And that would be one idea that I would have to spend some of that on, would be a bus. When we get to capital budget, we don't have that number yet. That would be one of the ideas I had, that maybe we just buy that bus as soon as we can with our fund balance.
So that means we'd have a bus 17 years old and at least one 18 years old. It's like how long do we want to, what's the useful life of a bus?
They've changed the requirements. They used to have years on it. Now, as long as they pass the DOT inspection, you can keep rolling them, but I get it each year that they get a little older, they get a little bit more wear and tear, and
Less reliable.
correct.
I think we want reliable vehicles when we transport our children. I would think maybe we're in the market for 2 buses, but I don't know what else we need besides that. You've listed some things, but I'm not sure what the costs are on those.
We'll get to those costs a little bit in the capital budget when we get a little bit further in the agenda.
Is the water heater at FES the same as the boiler?
No, Keith said the boiler's okay. They've done some repairs, and the boilers are doing okay. He's most concerned about the water heater up there.
Do you know what a school bus goes for these days?
The last couple that we've bought, we're right around that 130 to 135,000.
Is there still a big backlog to get a bus?
Yeah, usually if we get the order, so typically we try to place that order in April, and it usually takes till October to get it.
Okay.
Have we put in for a quote on the bus?
Bruce is looking for a quote, yeah, it just hasn't come back yet.
I think your idea makes sense, Brian.
I agree.
Well, I will, if that's without other feedback, I will work on some numbers pending what we decide with Jim tonight, but work on some of these and bring back some recommendations for approval next month.
And what about sidewalks? Do we have any needs for sidewalk repairs?
Keith hasn't brought that up. The only area that comes to my mind off the top of my head is the little lip out by the high school parking lot between the street and the parking lot. But I think our sidewalks are okay. I can have Keith check on that too.
Okay.
I'm thinking outside district office could use some help.
Okay.
By the doors there.
I was gonna say the same thing. I think there's if there's no other questions, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the volleyball going to Wisconsin Dells for the summer.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, we are moving on to high school principal, Mr. Lattimore.
Right, good evening, school board. For mine, just a brief one here, just to go through some things. Our MCA plan is for the 15th. We'll be doing our reading in 7th, 8th, and 10th grade. Our English reading MCAs. Math will be the following week for grades 7, 8, and 11. And we'll do that on the 22nd. And then science, which we have MCAs in 8th and 10th grade, that'll be going on April 30th. We had conferences at the end of February. Again, we are going through ideas and trying to come up with ways to get families in attendance. It was a poorly attended conference. We had 16 on Tuesdays, 18 on Thursday night come in as families. That's to 16 people, but it's families that came in. So we'll revisit that and see if there's some other opportunities where we can get families in the building, whether that be some other events, or we do a Google Meet or something like that, where we have options for families to meet with and connect with teachers through other means. So we'll be reassessing that and coming up with a plan for next fall for that. Some of my dates coming up, spring break next week. The end of the quarter is fast approaching, April 3rd already. It's hard to believe it's going to be April very shortly. And then the talent show will be on March 25th. We will have that during the day. We just had the sign-ups were done, and we will be performing that in the Fine Arts Center. So we'll get the huddle camera set up. We got a brand new huddle camera in the auditorium. That is just specific for auditoriums, so they did a test run on it. So they're going to try that out. I think we have a band concert, choir concert, so we'll put that on there as well. So opportunities for people to watch that if they want to during the day. See which staff make a fool of themselves the most. Not me. So I did put together some discipline referral data that just is comparing last year to this year. Blue being last year's numbers, the orange being this year's numbers. We are seeing some trends going down as we go through the year. March, must have a lot of days off last March, but we'll see what that looks like at the end. Our data overall is trending down as we go through the year, which I will meet with the the high school leadership team tomorrow will go over those numbers as a group and discuss them in ways that we can work with that. And then we have our two student school board members, Nyla and Lainey.
Good evening, everybody. I'm tired. School has been great for us students. Our seniors are getting ready for spring break. Yay, a break from the staff and some. Anyway, we get a break. It's gonna be really fun. We're gonna do a lot of bad things. I don't know. And then we'll be back for 2 days, and then we'll be leaving for our DC trip on the 26th, right after the. What's it called? The talent show. Yeah. See, I'm tired, guys. And you?
Spring sports started today. Very tiring. But yeah,
Baseball,
everything's going good.
Softball, track. Everyone's trying to think what's been on track. And that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Our drum group has been practicing every Wednesday, and smudging's going well. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, girls.
Any questions for myself or the ladies?
Thank you, Mr. Lau.
Thank you.
Next up is elementary principal.
Mr. Lattimore talked about MCAs. They are right around the corner. We just really are working with our leadership team to find ways to motivate our kids to do their very best. You know, that we see data every day that shows that they can do better than what they're showing on our state tests. So trying to set goals specifically for grade level based on what they did the previous year, give them a little push, but really just getting them to buy in. It's at the end of the year, they're tested out, they're tired. Daylight savings time, there's a bunch that we just continue to work, like how to get these kids motivated and give their best efforts. So that's stuff the leadership team is working on right now. Our sixth graders had a fantastic trip to Wolf Ridge. Probably one of the best feedbacks that I've heard overall from our staff. We had amazing chaperones. We have one here tonight. Last month I reported we only had 4 staying back, and within probably that last 2 weeks or so, we doubled that number. So 8 stayed back from HES and 1 from FES. Again, majority of them are just, it's scary to go a week without the family, or they just weren't comfortable going. But the ones that went did an amazing job. Super proud of our staff who worked so hard to make that a successful trip for our kids. We couldn't do it without our chaperones. You know, there's a lot of people involved. Busing, transportation, kitchen, all of that. It wouldn't happen with all of those put together. So super glad that went well again. So we'll start planning again for next year. As we know, we have decreased enrollment and budget cuts. So we are working on a master schedule that works for everyone. Probably see some increased class sizes. But yet to serve our kids the best we can. So that is an active part of our life right now, where we try to work on that master schedule. Unlike the high school, we have very successful conferences. Although, you know, if you look at our percentage numbers, you can see that trend going down as they get into that 5th and 6th grade room, those grades. 6th grade always has a good attendance in the fall or in the winter, because it's our final step before going to Wolf Ridge. So that communication with parents is really vital and important. So those parents do come in, but you can see at Hinckley, 5th grade was down to 66%, so we're already trending that way. But our teachers work so hard to connect with parents. I sat in on quite a few conferences throughout those 2 nights, and they just continually build those great relationships. even if there's hard discussions to have and touchy subjects. So really grateful they allow me to take part in them, but you can see our numbers, it's pretty successful. End of the quarter 3 is coming up on April 1st, so we'll be looking at planning our quarter end reward day. We'll probably be around skating is our guess. But if we look at our behavior data for the year, we have 80% of our students that have not received a referral yet this year. That is 336 students, so it's just amazing. You can kind of look at those numbers there. Pretty incredible. And that's really where we want to be with an MTSS setting with 80 of our kids. And actually they'd be looking at 0 to 1 referrals. So we're even better than what we're looking at right there. So the action item, I think Brian is going to hit as an action item later, but you can see there's 3 of our extended school year proposals there, including staffing. You can see there's a couple black dots throughout some of them, but that's just kind of covering up some student initials. So that's kind of all I got for this month.
Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Scullard?
I don't have a question specifically for Bonnie, but I do have a question regarding the resignation of one of our ELC teachers. How does that affect our operation with ELC?
We will, I believe, tomorrow or the next day, hire a long-term sub, so we should be just fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, we've been in that process. We started that process right when we got the news, so
Okay.
we should be running, as soon as we get back, we'll have a licensed staff over there.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you.
If there are no other questions, are we doing action item now, or is this a double?
We'll do all the ESY plans later in the agenda.
Is that okay with you, Bonnie?
It's just fine with me.
All right, thank you. Next up is community ed.
Okay, thank you. We've had a busy month, 2 months in community ed. You can see our numbers there. We had 120 came out for gymnastics. That was real successful. They hauled in a lot of equipment, but it went really, really well. Our new cardio group, we've had 35 participate in that. They're going to add one more day. Mother-son bowling was yesterday. I know we've got 63 there. We had 1 walk-in. We had 2 sessions, so we were there at the lanes for 4 hours. 2 sessions of bowlers, mothers and sons, and we had from pre-K till, I think there was a secondary student there. So it was really, really fun. Everybody had a really good time with that. We had a great Meet the Author event. Christina Shuey came and featured her book on the Hinckley fire. We had a lifeguard class that had 12 enrolled, so thankfully hopefully we'll be getting some new lifeguards. There were 4 recertifications, 8 first-time certification. 100 came out to the open gym events in Finlayson. And what else did I want to highlight? Oh, our free swim, thanks to the Hinckley-Lions, has gone really, really well, and we're going to extend that somewhat into March, just because we still have some funds to expend, so we're going to extend that into March. We, one thing we would like the board approval on is we are looking at a fitness center family discount. So let's just say, for example, it's $250 for one person for the year at the fitness center. That's if you pay for the year. If you would be a family of 2 or more, we would like to offer a $25 discount per person, just to try to get some more people in. For example, we've got a family that's interested. I believe their children are like 19 and 20, so that they're over that 18 age, but they all live in the same house. So that would potentially be $1,000. We would give them a discount, so they would pay $900. But I think even with the discount, just getting more people in is a win for our fitness center. So, thoughts on that?
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Just to get more people in there, more
Absolutely.
families, yeah. Any reservations? I don't know, does it need board action or?
Should get board action
Okay.
since it's not in our handbook.
Do you want board action today?
Let's
Your
have-
the
Yeah,
community
that's
ed?
okay.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion to give a family discount of $25 per family member for families.
I'd second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, everybody. And then I just wanted to point out too, our mother, the daughter dance, it's not 24, it's 25. That was a typo there. Must have populated, so.
Fixed.
And we got a Hawaiian theme, so. We'll be in our swimsuits. Anything else? Any questions?
I do have a question. I see
Sure.
there's open gym in Finlayson. Is there any chance we could possibly open up open gym in Hinckley at the high school?
For like all ages, families?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we can take a look at that. I think it all depends on the space, you know.
Okay.
What's hard is like you might be able to get this day, this time, but then in 2 weeks, it's not available. So it's, you know,
Okay.
In Finlayson was every Tuesday. So
Yeah.
it's a consistent time,
Right.
and it's getting somebody to do it.
True, that's the big
Finding that
thing.
person to
be
open it
there.
A
and be
volunteer.
the responsible
Yeah.
one to.
I think it's a good idea though.
Maybe it's worth asking or putting out there. Is
Yeah.
there anyone who'd like to volunteer?
Yeah. Or men's basketball or family, yes, especially during the winter months. Thank you. We'll bring that up.
And then I have one other thought.
Yep.
For community ed reasons, is there any chance we could somehow, just as an idea, maybe organize if we get funds from the state of Minnesota for like the arts? I wonder if we could somehow do like a charter to the Chanhassen Dinner Theater?
Well, yes. And you know, 2 years ago, we wrote 2 essential regional arts grants. One was to have Monroe Crossing come up here. The other one was to have our summer theater with Prairie Fire. Prairie Fire did not survive then. They went under. It's just a big. And so we did have another event. But I was, actually it's on my list. On Thursday, I'm gonna talk to, well, even Wednesday, talk to Chanhassen, see what the spring show is gonna be, if they can give me that information, sometimes they can't, and then to write another grant, because I know the essential grant was very popular.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know Barnum had a community ed trip to, and I don't think that one included lunch, don't quote me on that, but it was in the evening, so I don't think it did. They had a trip to Chanhassen for $125 a person.
How much was it?
125. But with the grant, you know, Essential was able to offer it for $30 a person.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. So I think we have to access those grants as long as we still can get them. And we felt a little bit, and Angela, you were in on this, we felt a little frustrated with our turnout from our community with the Monroe Crossing. The turnout that came to that event was pretty good, but the majority of people were not from Hinckley-Finlayson.
Okay.
That was a little frustrating, but I think a trip like that, and it's arts access, that's what it, you know, it allows our community to have access to high-quality arts experiences. So I think it's a win-win, definitely, yeah.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah,
And that has been talked about at community ed meetings for years.
yeah.
It's
yeah.
just finding the funds, because if we had to just do it, it's over $100.
Yeah.
And in our community, how we are gonna pay
Right.
2 people to go is
Yeah.
$200.
It's expensive.
It's expensive,
Right.
so.
And we did do, I took a group over to St. Cloud, an adult group, to the Paramount Theater. It was a wintry night. It was on the school bus. People said, got off at the adults and they said, never, never, am I gonna ride the bus? You know, it just was not really, really enjoyable. But
Right.
the charter bus is about $1,400.
Okay.
So, but the funds are there, and I know of East Central Regional Arts, they are willing to fund events like that. So,
That's great.
I think that's a real great idea. Thanks.
Does anybody have any other questions for Becky? Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Next up is new directions report. It is a written report this month. Does anybody have any questions? Brian could ask of Julie or could email her directly. If not, we'll move on then to committee reports.
So at the Retention and Climate Communications Committee, it was, there was a lot of discussion during that one. It was actually really pretty good. There was a discussion about elective options, and to be able to retain students like for a second year, so German class was one of them. There was also talk about seniors taking as many classes, especially on Fridays when they don't necessarily have to be here as much. And then how is that perspective for other students? Like, oh, I'm gonna take as many classes as I get so that when I become a senior, I don't have to take as many classes or, just hang out or whatever. So how that is maybe affecting some other students. But there was quite a bit of discussion, and staff even just kind of the climate, and some areas were feeling a little bit more segregated than others, just with the new 7th and 8th grade being separate, so there's not as much maybe camaraderie among staff. So there's just not anything to add.
But it was also good for the 7th and 8th grade students.
Yes.
Said to have that time separate, so.
All right, thank you. Next up is unfinished business, budget topics.
We are working, like what both Joe and Bonnie talked about, a lot of staffing and what our class sizes will look like, what classes we'll offer at the high school. Teachers are in the process of budgeting or making their requests for materials for the classes they'll have next year. I think it would be good for the board and maybe administration to have a work session in the near future so we can start laying some of those things out for you as the state gets a little further along with what they're doing with revenue and as far as where we're going with cuts to match that revenue. I can throw out some dates in my update later this week, but I think it would be good. We have about 5 weeks from today till our next meeting. I think it would be good to have a meeting in there as April and May are gonna get here really fast and go really fast, and but those are the things that we're working on now, and like both Joe and Bonnie talked about, working on what that's gonna look like staffing wise and class sizes for next year. I wanted to review the capital budget since we talked a little bit in my report about some ideas. As of right now, I'll jump to the bottom first, and we're still waiting on a couple numbers. We're still waiting on what a gas bus would cost, and Keith is still waiting on, Hinckley Elementary needs some new hand washing stations. If you've been there, some of them are getting kind of old looking and can't get them nice and shiny anymore, and they're kind of gross looking. They're fine, but they're kind of gross looking. So Bonnie's been asking for that for a few years. So I met with Keith today, he's still waiting on the quote. But long story short, as of right now, if everything on this list for facilities, technology, and transportation was approved, that would all come in at $640,000. And you can see what we've approved the last few years, so that's quite a bit higher. The biggest thing on there, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is a gym floor. So we'll know what the board thinks about that here before the end of the evening. But some of these, I think, would be used with that excess fund balance. And the biggest ones, I think the bus would be a good one to fit in there. I would want to run exactly what that extra 6% is dollar amount, but my kind of thought for that is using that one-time money for one-time expenses. And it could be anything on any of these lists, but my thought would be to kind of take these lists, trim them down. 300,000 will be determined tonight. but then try to get that number much closer to what we approved last year, so we're not possibly having to look at more staff reductions. So this list has not changed since last month. The biggest thing, I guess, right now, what Keith has on the top part is he still has lease and purchase. I just spoke with him today. He and I both would lean towards the leasing, and we'd look to purchase a lawnmower maybe a year from now. Keith really likes not having to store it in the winter months, and they come in and do the maintenance. So, but I was looking for some of that feedback, like we talked about earlier. But these would be the items on the list that I would bring to use some of that fund balance on. Any comments or feedback on capital budget?
How many smart boards is that?
20,000 buys about 3 or 4.
Last year we ended up
Maybe
getting 5. I would think we get 4, possibly 5, depends on if they're going, I would assume he's going through the same company, but I know I did ask him and he said he was looking at various options, so.
Yeah.
And how many classrooms have them
8.
as of right now?
I think we have more than,
Yeah, I think we
more than 8. 2 in Finlayson, maybe 8 down here, 7 or 8 down here.
And what's the need?
What's the need?
Does every classroom?
Mike did a survey and a lot of them, especially those who are teaching Bridges and Amplify, it integrates very well. I think Kelsey can speak to that. It integrates very well into that curriculum, allows our students to be interactive with it. I mean, it adds movement to our classrooms. It allows the teacher to be up and around moving versus stuck to the board. It's a great tool.
So how many more classrooms could utilize one?
All depends on how much you depends on how much we're shifting around.
Steve.
So, we won't be above what we need with 4 or 5 more, I'll say that. I think Kelsey and Tony both love theirs at FES. So, I mean, we'd have 2 more classrooms up there, if nothing else, that need them, so, at least.
Do we ever find grants for the smart boards?
We haven't, we can certainly look. But otherwise, my plan is to take some of the things on this list to use fund balance. I will, if we can get that far, which I we always have, I hope to approve both capital budget and what we would spend extra fund balance on in April. Is we'd like to get to start ordering some of these things, you know, like we talked about a bus. If we're gonna do a bus, it takes a while to get here anyways, so typically we do approve the capital budget first, just so we can start ordering and make sure everything's here on time. Otherwise, ooh, that's very big. You can see where our spending is as of March 1st, which is about 2/3 of the school year. Of our approved budget last June, we've currently spent about 62% of that budget. Again, that's not a perfect picture that we're gonna come in where we want to be, but it's good. I'm glad we're under. I've had some questions as people started to learn a little bit about our fund balance being higher. Why is it growing? You know, not only, like the auditor said, we had some different revenues and more special ed funding than we thought. When we come to the end of the year, and if we're, say, stay in the same picture where we're 4% lower than what we thought, that's extra revenue that goes into the fund balance. So that's how that got built up a little bit too. We didn't hire and spend everything that we had wanted to last year. So that's where some of that extra fund balance came from as well. And this year we're heading in a similar direction, mostly, even though our enrollment was not exactly where we wanted, we haven't hired everything that we were hoping to either. So that's the biggest reason those numbers aren't a little bit closer together. Revenue projection has not changed since last year. I do have a new state revenue forecast coming to me on Wednesday. The state sounds like it released its projection for next year's per student formula pupil aid, which it sounds like it's going to go up 2.74%. Of course, that we'll see. That's what they're projecting. So I hope to have new revenue numbers, maybe even by the end of the week, that I can share with the board, but otherwise, this is the same as you saw last month. I do anticipate when we speak next time having one, maybe two more updates. You can see where our current enrollment numbers are, which I think last month we were 856, so we've been pretty stable right around that 855, 856 since October, November. And you can see how that compares to the last 2 school years. But any questions on anything in the unfinished business?
Is there any chance we get student enrollment for Pine City School District and East Central School District, just so we can compare how our neighbors are doing?
Yeah, I got Pine Cities today. I can share that with you. I did reach out to East Central as well. She told me she doesn't have that information and it would take her hours. She said I could make a public data request, but she would charge us by law. I don't know how much that would be. She thought it would take a couple hours. So I did reach out to both of them. I got Pine Cities. I can share that with the board, but I do see the East Central superintendent again tomorrow, so I'll try to talk us out not having to pay for that.
They don't even have like opening enrollment for the last 2-3 years?
I'll ask her what she has to see how we could, maybe she doesn't have monthly, but she has it, something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
So,
yep, I do have Pine Cities and can share that in my update later this week.
that'd be great. Thank you, Brian.
That's what I have.
All right, then we are gonna move on to 7 policies. Is anybody wishing to pull a policy and not approve all of them at once?
I would like to just discuss policy 419.1.
Okay,
I think we need to make some possible changes.
okay. So are you wanna,
Could we discuss that separately from the rest?
okay. So let's start with does anybody else want to pull any policies? So I think what we'll do is we'll approve the first 6,
Sure.
the latter 6, and go back to 4.419.1.
Sounds good.
So the policies that are in front of us for approval tonight, we'll go to the second one, policy 524.5, personal electronic communication devices, policy 533, wellness, policy 606, accountability, policy number 607, parent review of material, policy 701, adoption of district budget, and policy 902, community use of school facilities. Does anybody have any questions for Brian regarding the policies?
I just have one on 533. Is that one that was talked about at the admin level and?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that gets put in student handbooks and make sure that is what we do.
All right, so I am looking for a motion to approve those 6 policies.
I'll make the motion.
Well, second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. So now we'll go back up to policy 419.1, the smudging policy. Does anybody have any questions regarding the smudging policy?
Yeah, so I just have a couple of things that jumped out at me that I feel should be tweaked a little bit. If you look at part 3, let's see, actually part 4, paragraph A5. It says in that last sentence, or the last part of that sentence, advise them of any other natural plants that may be used in the ceremony. But it's allowed to use tobacco, sage, cedar, and sweetgrass will be used as part of the ceremony, and then advise of any other natural plants that may be used in the ceremony. And if you reference a state statute, okay, so our school policy references Minnesota Statute 121 alpha.08. If you look at that, it says an American Indian student or staff member may use tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar to conduct individual or group smudging in a public school. There's nothing in this statement that says or any other natural plant. It's very clear. And so my question to Brian would be, what's the rationale of the legal counsel to include or other natural plants when it's not in the Minnesota statute? I would like to know why they thought that would be a good idea to include that in our school policy when I feel that could set us up for a lawsuit because we'd be breaking Minnesota statute.
I don't know the answer why they put that in there. I know when I talked to one of the staff members after the last meeting, they also concurred that sage, cedar, and sweetgrass should be put back in there. That's what we've had for the last year. I think that's what our American Indian staff have said they would use. I would be comfortable taking that out. I can ask the attorneys why they put that in there. But when I talked to one of the staff members, like I said, after the last meeting, they had also asked just to leave in sage, cedar, sweetgrass.
Were they asked if they use other natural plants?
We've always used sage, cedar, sweetgrass.
Okay.
I want to make sure I'm speaking appropriately. I don't know if you feel any differently or.
Those are the four main ones of traditional Native American use for smudging. What I do is we mostly use sage, is because when it is time of a woman's moon, it is so hard to explain this. When it's that time of a lady's moon, in Native American traditional, they cannot smudge. They cannot release any negativity if it is not just sage. I don't know if that makes clarity to any of you guys.
So Toby, you're asking to take out, just end it at, will be used as part of the ceremony period. You want to, and advise them of any other natural plants, because there would be no other natural plant being used. Is that, because it's not in the state statute? Is that what I'm understanding?
Just take it from the cursor.
Just
The cursor
from
to-
here,
is-
take that off.
Right, or, well, it says it may only be tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. I think it would be nice as a courtesy just to say which of those is being smudged. You know, maybe that would be a nice thing, but I feel the other natural plants should be removed, and I'm not sure how you want to word that. But I would like to know why our legal counsel threw in or other natural plants. I mean, to me that's, I'm not a lawyer, but on the surface that sounds like bad legal advice. And I would like to know why they put that in there, and maybe it would help me understand why. And maybe I'll think, oh, that's a great idea. So I would like some feedback from our attorney specifically to that question. Why did they put that phraseology in there? That I feel sets us up for a lawsuit from our lawyers. Maybe we need to consider changing our legal counsel if we're gonna get bad legal advice, if that isn't bad legal advice. Maybe it's good legal advice, but if it's not, maybe we wanna reconsider who's our legal team. And then I had there's one other paragraph that also contains the phraseology of other natural plants. It's, so we have section 4A5, and then it's,
Section 4?
That's what we were
That's
just
what we
on.
were
That's just what we were just
Oh,
on.
okay.
and then B3. So there's just those two paragraphs that I can see that has that phraseology.
Could we check with our NASA advisors and see if they feel like at any time other natural plants would maybe be used? I mean, is that a thing? No, so
What-
it's just those four and
Yeah,
that's,
what one of our advisors said was
Okay.
sage, cedar, sweetgrass.
so they
and
would
tobacco.
never ask to bring in something else, okay.
I mean,
Would that be insulting, or would that be like
I
not a
feel
nice
like
thing
it's
to
a
ask?
little insulting because like, also saying like other natural plants. We don't use any other natural plants to smudge with.
So
It's just those
should we
four.
just, would it be appropriate just to take that off?
Yes.
Would it be appropriate to ask which of the four, tobacco, sage, cedar, sweetgrass is being smudged, or that would be inappropriate to ask that question?
Nope, that'd be perfectly fine. As
Okay,
long as it's within those four and not saying other natural plants.
would it be possible to request, or just so you're aware of which of the four is being smudged? Maybe somebody has an allergy, maybe there's people have different allergies, and maybe there's one of the four, we need to take extra precautions.
I think if that
Yeah,
would
can
be
I mention
appropriate.
too real quick is that,
Yeah,
with the tobacco, we don't burn the tobacco. The
Okay,
tobacco gets put into a basket and then set outside as an offering. So it does not get burned in the school or
Okay.
anywhere like that.
so Toby, would you feel comfortable if we took off the natural plants here, rephrase that, and then went back to B, and it sounds like it would be more appropriate, 4B5, if we took off that last sentence and phrased it,
maybe,
when we have the ceremonies to know what is being used, and I would have to wordsmith that a little bit, but
maybe what you could do is just take and advise which of the four are being smudged.
what is being used during the smudging
Yeah,
ceremony.
advise which of the four are being smudged.
And then take the natural plants off the other one.
Correct.
Just end it at the parentheses. Or
Right.
up to these commas.
Sure.
I can clean that up if, Autumn, you feel that's,
Yeah, I feel it's appropriate.
okay.
Thank you. And then I just had one other concern. That would be paragraph, or section 5, paragraph A3. It just says, ensure that alternative arrangements are available to students and staff who are sensitive to smoke or other scents, including alternative means for class participation or changes to class assignments during and after the ceremony. I'm just thinking, as a school board member, the primary mission of our school district is to educate our children, and I feel like that's the most important thing we're doing, and that's the reason why we come to school. And I think other activities should take secondary precedence or importance over our education. So I feel like we shouldn't ask those who come to school to get educated to find alternative means to their education. I feel like if we're doing other activities during the day, those activities should be subject to the educational program or work around the educational program, not vice versa.
And we're doing it, we're trying to find at both buildings, especially if we do it indoor, what works for everybody, that, and trying to take when concerns come forward to find a different location or find an avenue that works. Right now, at both Hinckley Elementary and the high school, it's happening before classes even start. So we might have kids, especially at the high school, at different places of the building. Right now at both buildings, I believe the plan is outside, but we're trying to find a place that works for everybody, staff, students, Native American, not Native American, so that we don't have concerns and can just say this is our place. We haven't been perfectly successful at either building doing that, but that's my goal, is to, if and when we do it indoors, have a place that works, taking in consideration of some of the concerns that have come forward, yet try to find a consistent avenue or place where that could happen in the buildings. So that's how we've been trying to do it. When concerns come up, we do make changes, especially if it's health related. As you're right, everyone has a right to be here and not have, health effects from whatever's going on in the building. So that's how we're currently working through that part of it.
Could we maybe, just as an idea, and I'm not saying this is the best way to word it, or this is even the action or direction we want to go, but just as an idea, could we put, for that paragraph 3, could we say, ensure that alternative arrangements are available for students who want to smudge when there are students and staff who are sensitive to smoke or other scents, etc. could we look for alternative arrangements for those students who want to smudge when it comes to the attention that there are
If
sensitivities and
concerns were to
allergies
come
for
up.
other students in the
I
building?
think that's what paragraph B right below that states.
Okay. That's true, it does state that. Paragraphs are kind of a little bit in conflict, but I see paragraph B there, thank you. Maybe there is not a change that needs to be made with paragraph 3 then, if we have that paragraph B right below it.
So Toby, are you making a motion to, revise the plan, go through the NASA advisor for smudging to see it first before the board approves it? So we're not approving it till next month, or what is your, you had the questions, so,
Or if we just took those parts off with the natural plants and reworded those. And I can show you the rewording later in the week.
I would be okay with just revising those 2 paragraphs with the natural plants as we kind of discussed and leave that paragraph A3 alone.
okay.
Would you be okay with the smudging policy with those amendments? With removing the natural plants part of it, or?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And can I ask, what is your position with the,
I help with the NASA junior at the elementary school. As Native American, I do the smudging every Wednesday morning with
Okay.
them.
well, I think since the recommendations from the staff members who are involved in the smudging would like to remove the other natural plants, I don't feel like I don't see the reason why we should delay approval of the smudging policy. I feel like everyone's in agreement, and I think it's concurring with Minnesota statute. By making that amendment, I don't think there's any reason to delay.
Then I'm looking for a motion to approve 419.116 and traditional Indian ceremonies with those, changes.
And Brian, how would you word it? Do you have it worded?
I don't know, I would ask in that first part and advise building administrator or site, I try to use the same language of what is being used during the smudging ceremony. And then the other part, B3, I think I would just take off or other natural plants that may be used in the ceremony as applicable and just go right to and. So I would take, if you're looking at the screen, I would just take off that part and go right to and.
How does the rest of the board feel? Do you feel like you want to wait for Brian to come up with a final worded black and white phraseology, or just?
I'm okay with the change,
Yeah,
making the changes.
I think we all understand what you're asking, so
Yeah.
I think it's clear.
And I could share it with you all this Friday, before putting it on the website or making it public. Our current policy would, if the board would rather see it before it goes out on the website. Or if you're comfortable with me just doing it, that's okay too.
I'm comfortable.
Or Brian, do you feel like, is it a rushing thing where we can't wait till next month then, or? just-
We have a policy, we would just fall back to our current policy, which does not talk about natural plants. It just says sage, cedar, or sweetgrass, so
Okay.
it's not a rush to approve this. We have a policy already, so it's totally up to board discretion.
I'd be willing to just make a motion to approve the smudging policy, Brian, as you described how you would amend it with the verbiage you used tonight.
So we have a motion, do we have a second? There's a motion and a second, is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up are school board goals.
Just looking for feedback, because this is something we'll do probably in April, hopefully, is we're starting to work on school board goals for next year. Some ideas that have come up to me are these 3 that I had listed: school climate, staff morale, academic growth, fiscal responsibility, which are very similar, if not identical, to what we have in the current school board goals, but just looking for feedback as admin will help develop these and present these next month. If we want to see anything additionally, anything change, or anything specific you want me to research before I present some recommendations next month.
If there's no discussion, we're gonna move on to J Pride. Does anybody have any additions to J Pride? Okay, then we'll keep going on and talk about Achievement and Integration Plan.
Looking for approval of our Achievement Integration Plan that needs to be submitted to MDE. We have this plan together with Pine City, East Central, and McGregor. The biggest things that this, I'll go to the budget pages. The biggest things that this helps fund are smart mentors at both the high school and elementary school. And there's some oversight between Jonathan and Mallory Greenwald that help write this program. But it also helps cover for the New Direction program we have. And that's the programming. So when we develop the A&I budget, as you heard about last month, we have to develop programming between those school districts that I mentioned, that we receive the achievement integration, and the districts that connect to us can join with us. So what we've had a long-standing practice now, probably going on almost 10 years, is we partner together to help fund the New Direction Suspend Off the Street program. So that is where the biggest part in the collaboration part of the A&I budget comes from, but at the building levels, it helps by having the smart mentors with some academic enrichment, some smaller class sizes, some interventions for kids who might struggle in math and reading especially. So I'm looking for approval to continue that kind of programming. It also, in this past year, has brought on some student assemblies that we've brought in for, I think, 5 through 12. I think that was as low as we went, just down to 5th grade, but brought in some motivational speakers, some peer interaction strategies. So looking for approval to continue doing that, having smart mentors at both buildings, some of those programming interventions that we can bring in throughout the year to help our kids, and then obviously New Direction as well.
So I have a couple questions. So on page 7, down.
Which document are you looking at?
The first one.
Okay.
The Achievement and Integration Plan. With the key indicators of progress, it's right before goal 4, I think it is.
Goal 4 up here?
It's on page 7, the first box.
Okay.
If I'm under, it says list key indicators of progress.
No, go down a little bit.
Oh,
Right
sorry.
there, yep. So on the third item, it says the ACT test will increase from 25% in 2022 to 2025. So I just want to make sure that those dates were accurate since
It
all
should
of
be
these.
25 to 28.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Good catch.
And then I just was curious, like, so statistics can be skewed. And so what are some of the measurable, like, how are things measured? Are some of the goals, is it through MCA tests? Is it through the ACT tests?
A little bit of everything, including our Ames web and our progress monitoring tests that we do in September and then this time of the year. So we take kind of all those
Okay, so it's
for
all
the different goal
compiled.
areas. Yeah.
Okay. And then I was just curious, so this has been going on for a while, which is good. Are there any measurable outcomes? So what are some of the measurable outcomes of students that have graduated that, what has been some of the outcomes after graduation?
what they've done after they've left
Yeah,
our
do we
place.
have any
I don't know,
outcomes?
that's a good question, I don't know if we would have that
I
data.
don't know.
And I don't know for sure, probably not through this reporting, but I know this has helped with higher, one of the things, there are many things, we've had higher graduation rates as we've had these plans. And these, we've had kind of similar goals throughout. These are continuing to increase. Back when we started 10 years ago, they were lower than even where we started in this cycle. But that's a good question on what's happening after they leave here.
Yeah. So part of my thought process behind that is obviously we want to see every student to be successful. And so seeing how it is playing out in life, because we want to set people up for life as best as possible. So that's why I was curious.
And what would you look at, like employment or college or,
Yeah.
because
All of the
that
above.
success doesn't look the same for everyone, so.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Oh,
they're
yeah, for
gainfully employed or, that would be very interesting data to look at.
It would be very interesting to see how things are helping, just for everybody involved. Okay.
Maybe a question for seniors graduating would be, do you feel you are well prepared for college and the world?
That's a hard one too.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so,
Just
get to
kidding.
make it through that first year of college, you're probably doing
When they
pretty
get out
good.
there and they change their answer, which is
Right?
totally
Yes.
fine, but.
We all have done that. So
They-
that's why I
they
was
know
thinking
everything.
Right.
I know.
Well,
I
if
think
you-
that starts well
They're more
before
than ready.
graduation.
Maybe I've seen them here for 2 hours a day their last quarter, then they're not gonna be prepared. But I only gotta work 2 hours a day, this is awesome.
So so just some of the outcomes, like some longer
Yeah.
term outcomes would be very interesting.
But it is fun on the senior dinner night. All the kids say what their future plans are. It's fun to see all that. If they're not going to college, if they're going into the military. We probably could get some data from that. If it's still true, who knows?
I was just gonna add, I know through the Perkins grant, but it's been a number of years, they used to do a follow-up study of graduates at the 3-year after graduation and the 5-year after graduation. And I think they've discontinued that because it was costly to do, and a lot of times the mail, people just throw it away, and so people were actually calling. But that was very valuable information, I thought, because, on the senior night too, just about everybody thinks they're going to college or they're going to, and then it's like, well, have you applied? Have you, have you taken the pre-req, and I'm not saying that as a negative, but yeah, that 3 and 5 year is a good snapshot, so.
Do they still do high school reunions, like a 5-year?
Yeah, but I think it's on like the individual class to like kind of put it together and figure it out, so.
So it's bad.
Does the school ever reach out to past graduates to ask?
We have.
Do we have a way to contact them?
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
still
that's
have
right, I
some
didn't
sort of
think of that.
email address.
Anyways.
Slide into their DM.
Alright. So, we are looking for a motion to approve the achievement and integration plan. If there are no other questions or comments?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are e-learning days for 25,
26. Weird to think about winter at this,
You're in the
when we're
wrong
still
year.
in winter for the next year, but in order to do e-learning days next year, if we ever needed to, we need to approve them well in advance. That would be the plan. I have not changed this document at all other than the date. But looking for reapproval that if next year we need to ever use e-learning days, that this would be kind of our game plan, where elementary kids use choice boards, high school kids use Schoology, and it kind of goes through both teacher responsibilities, times they'd be available, and, you know, giving some grace period, because due to a variety of things, maybe parents not home, internet, things like that, but looking for reapproval for next winter to continue, if need be, using e-learning days.
Does anybody know what the internet is like? It used to be bad, but SCI cables come through in ECE. Does anybody know what it's like around here? Has it gotten any better?
I think some.
We do a survey at the beginning of the year to see if you have reliable internet.
Is that in the first day?
It's in the first day form.
It's part of the first day forms.
But I know.
Is that compiled though, any?
Jennifer, I think, takes it, doesn't she? Isn't that part of what?
That's a good question.
So they've really been working on
Right.
bringing internet, but I know there's a backlog too.
So it hasn't gotten a whole lot.
I can tell you, not too far out that way, I don't have SCI. It's not available to me.
Okay. It's not open.
And I have SDI. It's available to me.
And you're just north.
And I'm just, yeah, north of me.
Yeah, and we were told that it would be quite some time that it would come to.
And it's fabulous. All right, so I'm looking for a motion to accept e-learning days, e-learning plans.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the extended school year plans.
Looking for approval of the 6 areas of extended school year, summer school for our special education students. These teachers put these plans together based on what are in the students' IEPs. So what we are responsible providing for these kids in the summer. So I'll be happy to, Joe and Bonnie are here to go through specifics if you have any on any of these plans, but these are things that are mandated through the student's IEP to get them extended school year to help increase the learning. And even though they're in the IEPs, I have the board approve them since it impacts our budget. They are budgeted for, but just having you approve it anyway.
So if there are no questions, I'm looking for a motion to approve the extended school year plans for next summer.
This upcoming summer.
Oh, sorry, this summer. God, I can't do this tonight. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is first read on the credit card policy.
Just this one hasn't been looked at, I believe, since 2015, so Bridget and I have looked over it, a couple others in the district office have looked over it, but wondering if any initial feedback as we look to approve this next month.
If there's no questions right now, we will move on to the school calendar that is proposed.
So I have 2 proposed, and just want to kind of go through at least the unhighlighted ones first as they kind of hit both calendars. There is a full spring break, Deer Day is included. As of right now, we're looking at a professional development day the day after, or the day of Halloween. Workshop week, based on staff feedback and survey, would continue to have a day and a half added to workshop week. There are currently 2 snow days built into the calendar. What we are doing currently is doing snow days and then moving to e-learning days. Thanksgiving would still have a 3-day break. We would continue to have early release on Wednesdays. Draft 5, the biggest change, and I'll project that one. So in the last week, I've taken quite a bit of feedback. I'll start over. First, I'll show you draft 4. The feedback I really took was where the end of the school year is, with students' last day being June 5th and staff needing to come back for a half day on June 8th. I've taken a lot of feedback on that. I did compare this draft 4 to what East Central and Pine City's proposed calendar would be. Both those schools have the teacher's last day being June 5th. So taking some of that feedback and realizing that if we go to the beginning of the school year, it's taking away a day and a half of summer. And then if we went to June 8th, it is cutting into the summer, especially as compared to our neighbors. So that was why I developed draft 5. And I'll go to the end where the teacher's last half day would be Thursday, June 4th. Students' last day would be Wednesday, June 3rd. So the 2 days that are different is, and it would be the same as Pine City. East Central would not have this, but we would go to school December 22nd and 23rd. A positive, it gets seniors 2 more days during the school year, where if we went with draft 4, that would be 2 less days the seniors would have. It would still be a pretty typical 12-day break like we've had in the past, but it would at the end of the year put our students and staff out a day earlier than East Central and Pine City. So my recommendation for the board tonight would be draft 5 of the school calendar. I didn't hear from a lot of staff after I changed the drafts. It was late on Friday, but those who I did hear from over the weekend did say they preferred draft 5 over draft 4. Questions? And again, the calendars were created based on both the staff and parent responses that we put out earlier this year to questions that we were wondering about.
So there's no school on Halloween with draft 5?
We would, so what I told the staff is we would have to, because I created this literally at 4:25 on Friday afternoon. We would have to look at quarter dates, and currently what I just left were the professional development dates the same, where we would not have school on Halloween. We did talk a little bit about it at admin, that could be flexible or moved, but that is where it still is just October 31st.
I like 5 better than 4. I like getting out of school earlier for the kids. But just looking at it from my perspective, why not let kids get out a day earlier, even one more, move it to, what is it, June 2nd, if we get rid of the Halloween day off. We've got days off on the 16th and 17th. We've got days off on November 10th. I mean, it's like we're sprinkling in days off every other week.
Get rid of which ones are you asking?
I was just saying, since we have days off on the 16th and 17th, and also November 10th.
Well, 16th and 17th is MEA.
It's a PD day.
And I'd have to put that PD in somewhere, because we have to hit the requirements of the teacher contract.
Okay.
So if I turned any of the blue days, if I took them out, I still would need to find enough days in the year to make sure we hit the 182-day staff contract as well.
Okay, so that PD day would have to be during the school year then, not before or after?
It could be before, but I don't know that we would need before and after. We already have added days. I don't know that it would be very popular, or the need to add more at the upfront, especially we have so many other staff already doing above and beyond PD through some of the SCRED programming and special ed programming we have. I don't feel we need more upfront, and then at the end, I don't know if it'd be as meaningful as staff, admin, all of it. We kind of looking to move on to summer and refresh before we come back the next year.
I like how you have the spring break, the week of the 22nd. I think that's great. Instead of splitting it up, half of March, half of the first week of April, I think that's great.
And that would be common throughout all 4 county school districts. It'd be a common week, so it would hit some of that shared programming that we have for staff and students.
So the general consensus that you got from staff was that they would rather give up 2 days of their Christmas break.
Yeah, again, I think I only heard from 6, but so it's a very small sample size. Yeah.
That seemed to be the consensus.
And to be fair, like I said, I put it out at 4:30 on Friday, but it didn't take as much frustration. Even today, I didn't take anything on draft 5.
If there's no other questions, then I'm looking for a motion to approve draft 5 of the school calendar for 25-26.
Brian, just on the written side, December, you need to change that to 24th through the 2nd for no December.
for January.
fixed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I'll make that motion, Jody.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is our high school gym floor.
Recommending with some of that extra fund balance that we move forward and replace the gymnasium floor in the high school that is just off the cafeteria. In this link, you can see two quotes. The one I'm recommending is a maple floor. The other number that was in here that you saw was a composite floor, which isn't preferred by the coaches, Fayed or by Keith. This number that I have highlighted in yellow would be the cost to have a true gym floor, a maple floor, which is what Keith prefers, and the coaches as well. I'm asking for allowance up to 300,000. You can see these three numbers don't get there, but I am always worried about what are they gonna find if they dig something up, especially a floor that was built in the 60s. We did do some testing initially for asbestos. Granted, we just drilled in some sample spots. They didn't feel like there was any, but of course, when you dig up the whole thing, I don't know what's gonna be underneath that floor. So that's why I'm building in a little cushion with that 300,000 number, as these three numbers don't add up to that, but whenever you're reconstructing or doing something, there could be unforeseen things that come up. So looking for approval, those of you who've been on the board a long time, that was one of the reasons why we built that gymnasium down there, because this one was end of life. What the superintendent at the time said is we're about 5 years away from that being really end of life. We're at that time. So with the excess fund balance, I'm making the recommendation to go ahead and replace the gym floor.
Are there signs or red flags that a floor needs to be redone?
It is warping and kind of bubbling, and we've resanded it so many times, we can no longer do that without ruining the floor, so we've done all the internal fixes we can, other than sweeping and scrubbing it, but you can see if you go in there, it is bubbling and warping and kind of heaving. It's not peeling or things like that, but we don't want to get to that either.
Okay.
And it also has gone up almost double in the last 4 years. Did we look at it? 3 years?
So,
It's almost doubled in price. I think it was like 125. We got quoted years ago. Leo, do you remember?
I don't remember. It was quite a bit cheaper, I know.
and we could, like I said, we could do cheaper with a composite floor, but I think if we're still having some varsity type activities, or at least junior varsity type activities in there, let's get a traditional maple floor in there. And you're not getting as many possible rug, there's different upkeep with those composite floors, and they get slippery, and I think it's easier to take care of a maple floor.
How often is that gym used?
For
Every day.
every day for
FIAD uses it every day. C teams use it for all of our indoor sports, volleyball, basketball. There's
junior high sports.
Junior high sports use it for practice.
So that's the gym side uses.
Yeah.
I'm just struggling with budget cuts coming. I struggle with paying $300,000 for a gym floor when we need smart boards to educate our children. I just struggle with it.
Or do you feel like we should wait till we get our budget hammered out and just see? if we
No,
can
I
make
just
it
struggle
work?
with it in general.
Yeah.
I struggle with replacing a gym floor when our students need a smart board. I know it's needed,
But I think it's still I understand your point, Angela, but I think it's still part of upkeeping our facilities. I think if we don't, we're gonna end up like some of our districts around us that have had to put new schools up because they're so far gone that you can't go back to. So yeah, I'd rather buy smart boards or a lot of other things.
And As you heard at the beginning, when Jody asked the question of the auditor, we would have to use our LTFM dollars first, which I think was, Bridget, if I'm right around 120,000 or something like that in our LTFM. So we wouldn't be taking 300 out of our unrestricted fund balance. We have to spend the restricted first, and then we work to build up that LTFM again. But that was my plan for why we were building that up, to help offset gym floor costs.
I think when we look back at it, the school boards at that time probably made a wrong decision by not jumping at it when it was much cheaper. And now we gotta bite the bullet, I'm afraid.
Yeah, because I just think if we don't do it, then we're at that same situation before we did the addition about a new gym. Is we're losing like another gym, so then it's gonna be harder to schedule sports practices and games. And I mean, the community center was used back then, but that's not even an option, I don't think, anymore to use that space. So we'd really be, I think, hurting if we lost space.
And the reason I'm asking now, and not that we couldn't wait, is we're getting to that point where we may not be able to get it done this summer because of company schedules, which it is what it is at this point. But so to answer your question, Toby, yes, we could wait a little longer. The reason I'm bringing it now is with the hopes of, if it is approved, we might be able to still get on their summer schedules so it can be done before school starts next year.
And so the thought is, if it's not done during the summer, we would schedule for the following summer so we don't interrupt school year?
The goal would be to get it done this summer. If for some reason they couldn't, I believe, and Mr. Lattimore could correct me if I'm wrong, we could use the new gym that we currently have for FIAD to kind of help offset some of that. So we don't use all three. Our goal was to keep that new gym as a competition, keep it, not have the same wear and tear as we have. So I think we would be okay if they didn't finish by middle of August, but we might run into a problem for sports. I think FIAD would be okay, but we'd run into a problem with all the practices and things like that. Or maybe we'd have to use HES again, or Mrs. Sculler is saying no.
Is that what other schools do, is just have a competition gym? That seems like a lot of space to, like, I understand we want to keep the floor nice and shiny, and whereas I think of my kids that have one gym to try and get into, like,
Good question.
I don't know, I just still wonderment.
Dave uses the new gym. I don't know how many hours a day.
It's used more
Half hour a
now
day.
than when it was initially built.
Some of our others use it as a reward because the other two are being used, so they'll go in there and shoot hoops or do stuff, but just
But I
don't play.
think it's common to have more than one gym or a field house.
Just don't play floor hockey on it.
Or wear cowboy boots.
Or wear it, yeah. That's where you get in trouble, is like, if you go on there with like other, you should have gym shoes on, and everybody
Proper
brings
attire.
like cowboy boots or their mud boots and scuff it up. And they're not cheap to replace, as you see.
So Bonnie, what is your sentiment then on the gym floor?
I don't have one. I mean, I think I was an athlete, I was an AD. I mean, I think we need a gym floor. I mean, I think anytime we can find space for our students to be active is very important. Glad I'm not sitting in your chairs. That's all I can say. I mean, I think it's needed. I think we do find ourselves in a bad predicament if we don't have, we use it as a JV gym. Like, we need somewhere safe for our kids to compete in. It's really hard to play basketball or volleyball or anything on a slippery gym floor.
Right.
Doesn't the JV play before varsity games? I mean, it's.
Varsity team plays in there.
C-team plays
And if you have a doubleheader, then you have a JV team. I don't know if they still do doubleheaders.
We
or not,
haven't
because of the gym
last
floor.
because of the gym floor. That, I know, and that was convenient for our families that had both a boy and a girl playing at the same time, but.
So Brian, do you feel like if we move forward with this gym floor, that we're not gonna lose learning devices?
No, this would be funded with that excess, our fund balance policy is 25 and we're at 31, plus some of our LTFM money. I wouldn't plan to use any general ed funding that would go to any of those other no. This would come out of fund balance or restricted fund balance dollars.
And about 1% would come from the LTFF.
Correct.
But it could be money that could be used as smart board instead.
The LTFM money couldn't, but the fund balance money could, yes.
So if there's no other discussion, is there a motion to approve replacing the high school HF gym floor?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, no, my understanding, this floor is gonna be taken off Downton Smith, right?
Correct.
Do we, or does the school get to keep the old gym floor?
It's a good question. Do you
Back,
want to keep the old gym floor?
well,
Could we auction it off?
Yeah.
where my son was in Illinois, they kept it, stored it, and they made all kinds of cutting boards and all kinds of stuff and made a fortune. I don't know if we need it all, but it's just a thought. I graduated, or if I say I graduated and played sports there, maybe I won a cutting board.
Right.
Although I didn't graduate or play that one, but I think it's just a neat idea to look at it.
Yeah.
I can certainly have Keith ask
What's
the
that?
company what that would look like. And Bridget can figure out the auctioning part. I mean, it'd be,
Or you could have Ashley's shop class,
Yeah.
use those boards.
That's what did
and
it down
auction
there.
off or-
they just put it in their shop or used it in their shop classes.
They did in shop as a fundraiser and it was very
Good idea.
successful.
For the center circle with the Jaguar on it, you can sell that off or auction that off and something, so.
It's a good idea.
Somebody would want that, maybe a tabletop or something like that.
Replace the carpet in the district office with the gym floor.
So there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do roll call. Leo,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dave, Toby,
Yes.
Angela, Jody, yes. Motion passes 6-1. Next up is co-op transportation.
After the last school board, or at the last school board meeting, the school board asked me, this first tab is exactly what I showed last month with projected costs for our co-op sports, both if we took a van or type 3 vehicle and if we took a bus. I was asked to find out the costs if we just transported one way, so that's what the second tab. This would be just the district bringing students to practice. You can see here for wrestling, hockey, gymnastics, what those numbers, what those numbers would look like if we took a type 3. These numbers down here at the bottom are as if we needed to take a bus. I wouldn't anticipate needing to take a bus next year, just with numbers, you never know. But as of what numbers, at least what Mandy told me today, the best she could is numbers would look like a possible type 3. So you can see and these are the high-end costs based on highest range salary for staff. The biggest difference is we wouldn't be paying that bus driver or van driver time to be sitting at practice. So the cost difference, if I scroll over, you can see this is what it was with the driver sitting there versus the costs of what it would look like without the driver sitting there, just bringing them to practice. What I don't have in this spreadsheet is we would likely need to hire, especially if hockey was included, we'd need to hire or purchase probably 2 type 3 vehicles, one going north, one going south, as every type 3 vehicle we have right now is in use every day after school. And then at that point, I don't know perfectly if we could guarantee they'd be free, because it seems like anytime we buy a type 3 vehicle, we fill it as fast as we can get it on the lot. But I would think we would need to buy a vehicle that would go north and south. Maybe I'm wrong with that. what we've done for vans in the last couple of years is they've cost between $30,000 and $40,000. Again, that's rough numbers, and likely we would need, if routes stay the same for next year, which we're still working on, we would likely need to hire more drivers to help with that, as all our drivers are being utilized either as drivers or paraprofessionals after school. So there'd be some other costs that may come up, more than just these numbers here that I have in the spreadsheet. When I talked to Mandy today, and she didn't, might be on the wrong sheet today, I was just trying to find out to get some clarity on numbers. What Mandy told me today is we currently have no 7th or 8th graders in wrestling, 5 in 6th grade wrestling, 5 in 5th grade wrestling. I think that's, I'm not 100% sure if that's accurate, that's what Mandy told me. But we don't have 5th and 6th grade numbers for hockey and gymnastics. We do have numbers for hockey and gymnastics in 7th and 8th grade. We don't have any right now. So there's some, I mean, I understand 100% the requests, and that if we add, that it might increase numbers. But when I look at it just with costs and cents, I don't know that we can recommend that, or I can recommend that for next year. And the biggest part is with those added costs of possibly having to buy some vehicles and some driver's costs. So we'd be very hesitant to recommend it based on all the potential costs, and then possibly still needing to use those vehicles for bringing kids to and from school. Questions or comments or thoughts?
I just struggle because then I feel like if we're not allowing that, then we're kind of doing I don't know if disservice is the right word, but for those kids that are choosing to play those sports that we just can't offer here. I do have a hard time wrapping my head around how the hockey would work, just because they have different ice times and that can change, but I just struggle with not having something for those students that.
Talking to a couple hockey parents, it sounds like at the varsity level now, boys and girls flip either before school or right after school.
Okay.
I don't know, that's what the parent thought. I haven't spoke to their ADs, but that's what they thought for hockey, is some weeks boys go before school. But one of the varsity programs get ice time right after school. And the other gets it in the morning. I guess I don't know that for certain, but that is what I was told from a former hockey parent. I agree, we have lost students. I agree with you, Heather, we have lost students already. So it's tough.
Yeah, I don't like it.
So these numbers are based on potential, but it's not definite that.
These would be high end based on staff stuff, so they could be lower. I would project these being higher end.
But then we also need to purchase.
Without purchasing, correct. Just as far as staff and time, not needing to purchase or not purchase vehicles.
And my concern would be finding employees to drive for 2 hours a day when we have trouble finding drivers for our routes right now and the needs of our type 3 vehicles. I also don't want to see families leave. I don't know, this has been a hard decision.
So what about if we tried to see about contracting with 4.0?
I could explore that. If I remember last year.
Then we wouldn't have to purchase a vehicle.
Right, I would have to double check, because we did contract for a couple things last year. I can't remember it being a lot more of a cost, but I could check on that, certainly could.
Yeah. I mean, if it's comparable in cost,
Without having to purchase the
vehicles, I mean, it could maybe be an option.
Does East Central go up with anything for sports?
East Central girls hockey, right?
Moose Lake.
They go to
I
Moose,
think
so girls hockey.
boys go to Moose Lake as well.
Yeah, so girls hockey would be the
Boys
only
go to
one.
Moose Lake? I thought they went to Pine City.
Boys go.
Our
Just
boys,
go to-
East Central boys go to,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
sorry.
Do we have any girls?
Can we
on-
get the,
Do you have any girls playing hockey currently?
I think ninth
I
one.
thought there was
Yeah.
one.
I thought there was a couple.
Girls?
Yeah.
In high school.
I think maybe just one in high school.
Brian, I had mentioned to you about if we had a staff member that went north or south and pay them a stipend to do it. Might only be one way that way, but at least it'd be
Yeah, we'd have
cost
to.
effective.
It would, staff aren't always done at that 3:10 time, so we have had staff help with transporting in the past. It was some maneuvering with their schedule, and are they willing to put in their 8-hour time another way? Can we get their prep hour or their duty hour that hour? So we have done that in the past, I believe for hockey and gymnastics. So we could, that's not perfect trying to set the schedule, can we get their off hour, that 7th hour of day? But that, we could explore that.
And are junior high practicing the same time as JV varsity? I mean, is it too?
Hockey, no, I guess I don't know for certain on wrestling and gymnastics, I believe so.
Yes.
They're practicing at the same
Wrestling
time.
starts at 3:15 down in Pine City.
Okay.
And it's 7 through 12, all in
Okay.
the same room.
Okay.
They
I
get
think,
done at 5:15.
and I would think gymnastics is similar. Hockey's not. Whoever qualifies for varsity, but then they have bantams and peewees, and I won't try to say more because I'm a basketball guy. I don't know the terms.
So I guess that not knowing, like, so there could be, if we're gonna cover all of boys hockey, there could be 3 separate practices. And there
Yeah,
could be
hockey I think would be very hard to cover it all.
3 separate.
Yeah, I think if the board was wrestling and gymnastics would be, just because we know they practice right after school. I think hockey would be hard. I'm not as certain about girls, but I know boys hockey would be hard to accommodate 7 through 12.
Has there ever been like a limit, like there has to be so many students in this sport in order to do the transportation?
In my time, we've never done, so that's a great question. We could sit whatever,
We do it with classes.
yeah. We used to do it with activity bus, this route won't go if we don't have enough kids, in our own districts,
And we
that could
stopped
be.
running the activity bus
Mhm.
because we only had like 5 riders.
I think that would open the door for like uncertainty if we had a cap though, because if we thought we had 5 and then right before the season started, a couple kids said, hey, we changed our mind, we don't want to play that sport, then the other 2 or 3 all of a sudden can't, and so if they were gonna make a decision to go
Parents would have to
elsewhere.
scramble, yeah.
I think a minimum number, like Janelle says, is a good idea. We don't want to haul for one person, I wouldn't think.
So Brian, just so I understand this, the wrestling one way is at 6507 and then waiting is 18,790, is that what you said?
Wrestling, if we took type 3, so that's what I have highlighted here, this is one way, without having to purchase a vehicle, wrestling would be just under $3,000.
Nope.
Oh,
This
okay,
one.
gotcha,
That's the one way.
okay. So then could you just explain one more time what the cost with drivers staying as wrestling 6507 versus the 18790? What's the difference?
The 18790, this would be if we had to take a van. The 6507 would be if we used a type 3. The 18,000 would be if we took a bus, just because it costs more to bring bus to and from.
Okay.
The 6507 would be if we used a type 3 van vehicle.
And those are round trips?
That first tab is round trip, yeah. The second tab would be just driving to practice, driver come right back.
Gotcha.
Do co-op sports pay the same fee?
Yep.
Okay.
We changed that a couple years, where basically they all just pay that fee, $55 fee now.
Okay. I know that hockey has those adjustments, but.
Yeah, the board changed that a couple Julys ago.
Does Pine City hockey have like, they have pull tabs, right? Down, that they did that, if you had them in some place at a VFW, that money that was earned would go to, that's like Rush City would have so much money that would be given to, they don't go up here to do that.
I think a lot of ours are the VFW, right?
Like Pine City Hockey has pull tabs, they're 503C and that helps offset some of the costs.
Lions.
I know the individual kids would do some fundraising and sell some things, but I'm not sure on pull tabs.
Might be something worth talking to their
Yeah,
AD
and
about
it
if they
certainly
come back.
doesn't have to be decided tonight. If there's more research, we're getting to the point where we should make a decision so we can let families know. It doesn't have to be March 10th. It could be April, whatever our meeting is. If the board would like me to do more research or ask some more questions, get some different numbers. I just thought for the district side, as we get to budgeting, I'd like to know sooner or later, so if we're building in costs or need to look at if we are gonna end up purchasing more, I'd like to know that sooner so we can plan accordingly for the district budget.
Is the board,
Okay,
Go
that's
ahead,
a
Leo.
question. If the school board decided to haul one way, would any chance that wrestling parents could haul them back or not?
Absolutely. Yes, that,
Absolutely.
we would,
All we need is one way.
Okay.
getting them down there is the problem.
Especially at 3.
Because of time-wise?
Yes, but picking them up at 5:15, 5:30 down in Pine City is not an issue. It'd be great if we can get them down there and back, it'd be really cool. But I fully understand that costs money. And like I said last month, like my hopes is to keep building this program up. And if we don't get those kids down there, I can't build it. I can't. They all leave. I lose them every year. And it sucks. It's absolutely annoying to put time and energy into these kids for 3-4 years. And then they go to Pine City, they go to Mora, they go away. And it really makes me angry. Gosh,
He doesn't hide his emotions. He's passionate.
Would they need a ride to the meets too, or the parents would take care of that?
No.
Just practice,
Just
right?
practice.
Just
Okay,
practice,
just practice.
just getting them there is the hard part.
The school, Pine City is very specifically said, if we can get something going up here, they would even move practices up here 2 days a week, down there 2 days a week, much like Bram and Rush City does, which would also, again, offset a boatload of costs.
Yep.
But we gotta make this decision now to get it built to where we can get 10, 15, 20 kids from the Hinckley area to
As
make
part of
it,
the co-op,
to make it work. But now, every year, I lose
all of them.
all of them, every single one of them.
how far south does our most south bus route go?
Maroon, I think
gas
Maroon
station.
is usually our cutoff.
To the gas station?
Yeah.
That's kind of where we have a crossed off.
How far south does our district border go?
Or the end of Hinckley, well, that's a good question.
So I guess I'm curious, if that bus that goes to Broome, are those transporting our kids that are in district? Or are they open enrolling?
There are some that are open.
I would say
know.
both, yes.
Yeah, both, I would agree, both.
Have you ventured out past Pine City? Do they have anybody else that would be willing to come? What time does transitions leave? Like, is there any way we can?
Yeah, maybe they could hop on the transition bus on the way back.
Transition buses leave at what,
2 o'clock
2:15?
though.
Yeah, it's an hour early.
And how many go back
And
to
we
Pine
go to
City in their
Pines-
van?
And
Or is it a little bus?
It's a little bus.
And same thing, we do transport to Pine City in the afternoon, but we get down there about 2:15, 2:20, Yeah, we probably get down there 2:30, so we're back in time for bus, that'd be a little too early to let these kids out. Unless we could guarantee they had a study hall 7th hour, but that's easier said than done.
We have extra round and there is people of retirement age who are interested in doing the driving for this kind of thing too.
2 hour.
So as far as like the driver aspect, sorry, I don't know if
Yeah.
we're allowed to speak, but from the driver aspect, what you talked about, like there's people who are interested in helping with it if that's available. And, we speak from ours, but
Yeah.
we don't want to see just our kids succeed in this. We want to see this grow and see some of these 40 kids that are active in it in our elementary grow and expand with it. And to do that, this isn't an us problem, this is wider.
Yep.
And we really want to help all these kids achieve that.
What's, you can have 6 in a type range?
8.
8 with the driver,
Yeah.
so 7
That's if we
kids.
have,
So
I mean,
how-
then we'd have to purchase a big vehicle.
Yeah,
Or it's gonna have to be the Suburban with hockey bags. Because you can't get those hockey bags in the back of the
I don't know if
top.
they keep their
The third
equipment
row's up.
for hockey down there in locker, I don't know.
They have the locker room with the storage down there.
For all,
They leave their
So
stuff.
For
I
7,
just spoke
12.
with Maura to find out like what they do for theirs, and so they have locker space down there for their hockey team, because Maura transports their girls over to Pine City, because they're all co-op together, and they have locker room space for them to keep it, because it is, like you said, it's way too much.
do you know if that's for grades 7 through 12, or whoever's on varsity?
It's the, well, I guess I didn't ask specific, but I know that it's the girls' hockey.
Okay,
It'll probably be
Yeah.
JV varsity.
Mhm.
7 through 12. Because a lot of JV is 7th grade, yeah.
So more transports.
It was more transporting the girls?
Maura transports their girls'
So do we
hockey
have
from
kind of
Maura to
numbers
Pine City for it.
next year?
There was issue with locker
if I
space.
have that, I only asked her about our junior high.
They used
And
to
there was
have,
question
I guess
about
it's
the
more
fairness
7
between the younger people, because they always have
And
locker
maybe
space and the
10.
girls didn't, so that, it's been newer,
I had
that
'em
they
last
made
month,
sure
I
the
don't
girls
know
had
where
hockey locker space for their gear.
There's no.
That was more recent.
and they
I mean,
did
'cause
share
there's 8 kids
facilities.
and we have to take a bus.
Right,
That's
anything,
that's a
right,
huge.
the cost goes up
Yeah,
real
it's all
fast
been
after
for
7
3 years
kids.
now. This was a, this was a,
But yet you don't wanna do it.
But they also have some practices over
Doing it
at
for my
Mora
kid
as
is-
well.
mhm, they built it so that
And
they
game,
can share
yeah,
it.
so they,
concept, yep.
And that's the same thing that Rush City and Graham are currently
Yep.
doing with their wrestling team too, is co-oping, just like Mora's hockey with Mora and Pine City.
Just last year.
One
just
family,
in Diesel's career long
Yeah.
was. So Mora only co-ops their girls hockey, so they're
3
running
that I know.
one
They have
bus.
their own hockey for the boys, like they have enough to do
Yeah,
a more
yeah.
hockey, but they didn't have enough for the girls, so they co-op hockey. I can't speak to the other sports
And they have
or
their own
anything like
wrestling,
that.
so they only run one bus to a co-op sport.
That I know of.
And
I
yes,
can't
see,
say for
it's just
certain,
girls-
but I know for
girls
certain they
hockey.
bring the girls. over.
Yes.
Yes.
the only thing they would do is if they co-op with Malacca for hockey, so they might do some practice over at Malacca or Pine Princeton, I don't know, but that would be the only one that I know about Mora.
Wrestling, they're on their own.
Yep.
And my other only concern is just doing it for wrestling, not doing it for hockey, and then girls hockey or gymnastics. I feel like it's a one and all, not just picking and choosing which sport gets transportation.
But like Janelle said, you need to have it. I mean, you can't be doing it. There should be a minimum.
And I agree with that too. What if they all meet the minimum?
What if there's time constraints? You talk about going one way, because that's what you're talking about for hockey, like they have practice sometimes honestly at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. At that point, there's not, I mean, not all the time, because parents do odd shifts, but when you're looking at 8 o'clock at night or something, the parents should be able to drive that.
It would
I would
have,
think
it would
if
have to
it's,
be right after
if
the
Yes,
practice
it would have
was
to be
right
right after the school.
correct.
So
Yes.
that would
Correct.
eliminate some of that.
Yeah, so I would, there would, need to be
I would think if-
stipulations that it's right after school for
Right,
that
right, we're not
transportation.
gonna all day long go to these various sports, we'll get you to, if you have practice.
It leaves here at 3:15.
Yeah, it leaves here as soon as the school day's over and gets you to practice by 3:30. And that's the only practice we go to.
Are these lumped like together for but on their own. I guess my question is be like, you'd send, if that was the case, like wrestling would have, and boys hockey and gymnastics, a bus south.
Yeah, we didn't lump them together with, I just had, when we figured these costs, I did them sport by sport without knowing. They could be lumped together, you know, say we only had one wrestler, one hockey, one gymnastics, that's one,
Van going.
we're going down to rush, you know, we're stopping along the way, but I didn't know how to budget for that unknown, so when we budgeted for it, we picked each sport as a standalone. So those costs could be tweaked that way, you know, say it was a
So it would
wrestler.
be less in cost because the boys hockey and the wrestling would be going at the same time.
Could be, if it fit.
And gymnastics.
And gymnastics.
I mean,
Yeah.
the going south could in theory all be on one ride, depending on numbers. If it was a bus, for sure they could all be on one ride. I just didn't know how to budget for that without knowing for certain what those numbers would be. But yes, they could be lower, because we could just, instead of doing wrestling, hockey, and gymnastics.
We have one in gymnastics right now, correct?
Yeah, I believe so, I believe you're correct.
Or in the 8th grader?
I think so.
One
For the
senior
Flamingos.
and one 8th grader?
But if all three fit on one ride, you know, that cost would be that 38, maybe a little bit more because you're stopping, but you wouldn't have this 3 and that 25, depending if they all fit in one vehicle.
But then you're looking at a bus, and then you need somebody that has a bus license and.
Bus becomes much harder, especially because of the licensing.
Right.
You've got your license.
Very true, Janelle.
I could just take a bus home, I'll live right after school.
Joe,
Boom, boom,
did I
boom.
hear a volunteer over there?
He has his license too.
All right.
Well, Joe could drive bus.
Yeah, just drop them off on your,
On the way home,
tucking
yeah.
along, there you go. Then
Mrs.
you know
Sculler,
that
do
you're
you
done
think
at
you wanna ask
3:15
me
every
I
day.
do.
I got
So
3:15 every day.
our gymnastics athlete, how do they get down there currently? Is it with
They-
Parents
They're
the
I thought-
coach?
I thought they're driving.
for gymnastics,
Yeah.
how do they get to practice?
Drive?
Yeah,
Their car.
Right,
Yeah.
The student.
The student
Yeah.
does?
student or parent.
I believe she's a senior.
Do we have one younger that does gymnastics?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering, is that coach, I believe there's a coach that, I mean, could we work with that like adult if we had one vehicle that was going somewhere? Not that you can always bank on that coach being there, but. Just an idea to throw around.
I would like to see enrollment numbers, better enrollment numbers if we're looking at making a cap or making a minimum of running type 3 in OLS. And I know you can do your best with, you know, adding these 2 up, and that would be the high end versus something that's gonna be lower if they do have practices and are on the same day, but.
Yeah, I think
I
if you
also
added
look
all
at our
these
budget
together, that
cuts
would be
too.
the highest number, minus if we had to purchase vehicles, but.
Gymnastics and wrestling would be after school every day.
Right.
Used to be the
It's just
hockey
be
that would
running.
be.
It'd be hockey that might not get
Be running every
consistent
day.
transportation.
Outside of meets or.
Right.
Seasonally, how does it, like wrestling and hockey, they're gonna kind of cross a little bit? What about
Yeah,
gymnastics?
They're all winter sports.
They're all winter sports.
They cross, the only difference is the practice times for the different hockey teams, because they do run until 9 o'clock at night, depending on the age group for the hockey team.
8:40 or 9:45 to 10:45 is the latest they
latest
run.
one. So she wouldn't have to transfer any of those, but they have the varsity groups right
But you
now.
make it specific that it'd have to be for varsity or
Just after
we're
school
not
practice.
transferring bantams or
Yeah.
peewees or
We're
anything
not
like
doing
that.
6
That's-
a.m.,
That's not a
9
school
p.m.
sponsored.
And are these the only
Activities.
4 things we come up with?
Mhm. Yep.
There's no other.
as of today.
I think if the school does one way, it gets the athlete to where they need to be to start the practice, and then if the parents can bring them back, then the school's taking ownership of part of it, parents are taking ownership of part of it. I think it's a group. I think it's nice to see both parties involved in the cost, and since we have a tight budget, I feel like maybe in the future we could look at doing round trip, but I think now with our tight budget issues and declining enrollment, maybe it's smart just to do the one way and just do that for now so the kids can be active in their sports, and I think sports is a good thing instead of being at home on the computer or losing an athlete to another school district.
I would be interested to know if girls hockey would want transportation, or they can get them up there, but if they can drive, they can drive back.
Yeah, I haven't heard from anyone girls hockey. I just included it because I thought, similar to how you said,
Yeah.
if we do one, we do all.
With no minimum?
I think of the no minimum just because of that scenario, like if we had a minimum and we met that minimum, but then right before the season started, kids decided they didn't want to, then those other poor kids, you know, we tell them sorry, and that doesn't give them or their parents any time to, and maybe they would have switched schools knowing, you know, so that's my issue with the minimum. It makes sense, but
You just need to be clear on the expectation.
We can't determine any cost till we know how many kids are
Practicing it,
going.
probably communicating it.
So
Just
you know
maybe
what
some
people you gotta
changes.
take.
Like,
They gotta commit,
I'm
they
wondering if
gotta
we're-
commit pretty quick.
That's also how you build it too. Honestly, like, if we're just going straight off of our youth numbers in the pre-K through 6, you're looking at 2 wrestlers that would be joining for 7th grade, plus the one that's already there, so you'd have 3 wrestlers that are committed for next year. Again, there might be kids going in 7th grade who are like, I didn't know this is an option for me, I'd like to join, so you can't really tell for that. But it's hard because that number will grow if it's there. If the service is there and provided, it will keep growing and there'll be more and more who will do it. If it's not there, like these kids are quitting earlier because we've already had some that dropped out of wrestling going, it isn't an option for me. So I need to switch to basketball while I'm young so I can get, like parents are pulling their kids from wrestling because there's no support for wrestling in Hinckley at this point. Like, it's hard. And so they're switching to basketball because they know it's a guarantee, even though that's not the choice of the kids. If that makes sense.
I guess I think we should defer till next month. We'll know our budget situation a little better. But I think what I'm hearing is people want a minimum of how many kids are going down or up. So then it wouldn't be a one for all if there's only 1 or 2 girls hockey. There has to be a minimum for south, north.
Is that a motion?
That is my motion.
that there has to be a minimum.
Then we table it?
That we table it to April. Get the correct numbers. And if we do this, that there's a minimum of riderships.
They're saying April's gonna be too late. Is that my understanding?
It's been 5 months of emails going back and forth. And it's frustrating, very frustrating, because I need to know what I'm doing next year with my kids. Like,
It was a motion.
A second motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
The motion's to table?
To table it with a minimum.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Roll call. Leo,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Heather,
No.
Dave,
Yes.
Toby,
No.
Angela. Jody, yes. Motion passes 5-2.
I will have those updated for you next month.
Could you have them for us at the budget meeting
Mhm.
before the,
Before the April meeting? Yep.
yeah? So we can look at everything on one, if we're,
Mhm.
So Brian, you're just looking at seeing how many students want to do the sport, is that it? Or what question are we asking?
How many?
Yeah.
I would think 5 through current 11 are in each sport, and what a minimum would look like for each activity. And
So we haven't really asked that question yet.
I have it, just not, I can't find it in my, it's not in this notebook, so
Okay.
I've asked it at different times, how many are in high school, how many are in middle school. I don't have it all with me tonight.
Okay.
and we want 7 through 12 numbers.
What about sixth grade? Should you get
6 through
those
11.
I
numbers?
would think 6 through 11 we would want,
Okay.
yeah,
I
at
guess
least,
we're-
yeah.
We're only covering 7.
So then if it is put on for the budget meeting, would there be a potential to approve it if we had all the information?
If
We
we,
can't,
if we call it a special meeting, we could. If we just do a work session, we could not. That'd be up to you. If we
So
wanted
my
to.
question is then they could have some answers, and before the April meeting.
Can you solidify that Pine City be willing to have some practices up here?
Yes.
That cuts down on half the driving?
Yes, but we
They
gotta,
wanna see enrollment.
we gotta get a program up here to an extent, more than 2 kids. Every year it's 2 kids that we lose. We would have 6 or 7 kids, 6 kids right now in between 7th and 8th grade. So there's a decent number right there. It's building, you can't build a wall without laying the first block.
Where would they practice? In the small gym? That's
Yes,
where they
and
used
that's-
to practice.
Yes,
We still have the mats up here?
yes, we do.
Okay.
We're
But I-
doing the youth practices with the
Pardon
mats.
me?
We do the youth practice in the
Okay,
small
yeah.
gym with the mats currently.
Okay.
And it's working great.
are our gyms being used at that time?
After
the
school,
small
I
gym.
think depends on the day, depends if there's games, but yeah, all 3 gyms are being used. When we used to have wrestling 11 years ago, we were utilizing HES more, or the Community Ed Center more. So all wrestling right now is happening after our 9 through 12 practices. It would be hard after school, depending on game days, stuff like that. All 3 of those gyms are used for C team through varsity in the winter season, boys, girls, basketball.
Could they use
In
the
7th and
elementary
8th.
gym?
In
They
7th
could,
and
they
8th
could,
grade.
yep.
I would do that in a minute.
Elementary could be an option.
Okay, any more questions for Brian? So then we'll make the April,
For the April meeting.
instead of a work session, will be a special session, so we can
Vote.
vote.
One meet up here.
Yeah.
I'll look for the week after spring break to do that. Just because I have conference next week, 3 of the 5 days, but maybe the week after spring break, we can, if you could look at your calendars, I'll shoot out some dates that week, which would be the week of the 24th, which would still be 2 weeks out from our April meeting.
And prefer later if possible.
Later in that week or later in March?
Later, or even April? Week before the board meeting?
I'll throw out some dates for both
Okay.
weeks.
All right, next up is resolution to accept donated funds.
First one, we got a donation from Jaguar Nation of $200 for the robotics program, so Looking for approval to accept that donation.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the second resolution to accept donated funds.
This is a donation from Hinckley-Lions in the amount of $737.62. It's to help bring kids in the high school to the Envirothon. Something new we've never done, but go learn a little bit about the earth and some environmental things. And our science teachers and Jill Carlier put that together. And so looking for the approval of the donation from Hinckley-Lions.
Where's that held at?
I believe it's in Duluth, Cloquet maybe?
Yeah, it's somewhere up north.
But this covers sub-cost and transportation and registration.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Is there a
So far
second?
away.
I think that
School owns all kinds of land that they, for the purpose of this stuff.
this is kind of a competition
The
and regional type activity.
Who made the motion?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And looks like we're at the end of our agenda, so I'm looking for a motion to approve our meeting.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?